Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to May's first Way Forward Workshop Leader Lunch Break. We're thrilled to have you with us. Mayor Bibb made a campaign commitment to bring new life to the West Side market. In fulfillment of this commitment, one of his very first acts as mayor was to appoint Jessica Trivisonno as senior strategist to guide the reincarnation of the West Side market. Jessica comes eminently qualified for the role and the difficult task at hand. She is a lawyer by training, practiced at Walter Haverfield before transitioning to serve as the Economic Development Director for the Detroit Shoreway Community Development Corporation. In that role, she supported the expansion, retention, and relocation of businesses in Detroit Shoreway, Cadell, and Edgewater neighborhoods. Her legal and business acumen and her experience in community development have already yielded impressive results for the West Side market. Within 100 days, she had worked to secure an additional $500,000 in the state budget to support the market, advocated for legislation to lower rents for vendors, allow for pop-ups for vendors, for fairs, and even opened the door for potential alcohol sales in the market, always a hot topic. She views herself as both a bureaucracy buster and a facilitator as she carefully guides the market into its next generation and addresses long ignored infrastructure, vacancies, and works to engage stakeholders in reimagining its future. It is one of Cleveland's most beloved landmarks and destinations, and there could not be a better person leading this charge. Jessica, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, and everyone for having me here today. I put together a couple slides to sort of guide us as we talk about the West Side market. I'm guessing everybody can see the slides, yes? Awesome. Great. Well, I'm going to start with just a tiny bit of background about the market. I'm going to assume most people here are familiar with the market, love the market, are here to just hear what the plans are for the future. But I always think it's helpful to start with some history for context. So the market was built in 1912 as a public market. If I had a dollar for every time I heard somebody say it was a train station that got converted into a public market, we would have fewer money woes than we do right now. It was always intended to be a public market. It was originally one of three public markets. We had a market on Broadway, and then another one where Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse is. So we had a central market for a long time in Cleveland. The West Side market today, I would say, has a pretty healthy tenant mix. The tenants who are there are really resilient. I mean, they've gone through 2 years of COVID. And some of them actually had some of their better years in the last year or two as people were, staying at home, cooking at home, spending a little bit more money on groceries than they might have before. So we still have a lot of long-term and legacy tenants, but we do have, a relatively high amount of vacancy. We have 32% vacancy. Half of that is in the market arcade. So people always call it like the fruit and vegetable hall or the produce arcade. So that's 50% vacant right now. And then 11% in the main sort of market hall is vacant. The previous administration had commissioned a report in 2020 to kind of think through some operational changes to the market. That report we're still waiting for them to sort of finish it up and make it pretty. But it was initially released in January by Cleveland.com. So that's a 95-page report that kind of walks through some of the challenges of the market, some possible operational strategies, makes some suggestions for what can be changed at the market. But that was really, the whole report was really based on this foundational idea that the city would continue to operate the market, which is no longer an operating assumption that we are tying ourselves to. So there's a lot of good in that report, but there's still a lot of work for us to do to sort of assess where the market's at. As was mentioned, Mayor Bibb has appointed me as the senior strategist to focus on the West Side market. This is the beginning and end of my portfolio. I wake up every day and think about the market. I go to sleep at night thinking about the market. I dream about the market. I am fully immersed in all things West Side market. And I really see my job as having two main kind of components. One is strategizing for long-term operation of the market. This market has been with the city for the past 110 years. We want it to be with the city for another 110, 220, 330 years. But we also need to see some improvements to the market to make sure that it's sustainable. So thinking about that long-term strategy, but also trying to think through sort of what are some of the short-term wins, what's the low-hanging fruit, what can we do to make the market the best possible place for people to do business, to shop, to have as an anchor in their community. How can we make it the best it can be right now? So I'm straddling those, long-term and short-term things at all times. Some of the challenges of the market, I could probably spend, 2 hours talking through challenges, but I know we don't have all of that time. So I'll go over just sort of a couple high level. One is the facility. It was finished in 1912. And before the project was undertaken, it was actually sort of a controversy in the city because it is so grand. That the question was, can Cleveland really maintain something like this on a long-term basis? They decided, to move forward with it, that we deserve to have this really gorgeous public market. But it's still, there's been a lot of deferred maintenance and a lot of challenges to the facility. In the past decade, the city has invested over $11 million in the facility. That's in a lot of things that, you might not notice, but you would if they weren't done. So things like, I'm showing here, this is the glycol system. I've learned what a glycol system is. That's the system that refrigerates the display cases and the coolers in the basement. So that's what keeps all of your products cold. That was a major infrastructure update. Changing out even just the doors on the produce arcade to make sure that we have ADA compliant doors that open and close the way you expect them to. Everything costs $1 million or more at the West Side Market is also something I've learned. So no matter what we want to do, I should just assume it's at least $1 million. There was a big facility assessment done around the market centennial in 2012 and then updated in 2019 that sort of looked at all of these different building components and assessed, what's in a critical condition, what is in, poor condition, and what is okay. We had lots of things that are critical and remain to be critical, and we anticipate we still need another, tens of millions of dollars to improve the facility just to get it to where sort of like a baseline, right? Like that's no bells and whistles. That's a roof that doesn't leak. That's air conditioning. That's really basic things for the market. Another challenge, I kind of hesitate to call it a challenge, but a quirk about the market is our vendor recruitment and retention. So the market would be nothing without the vendors, right? It'd be a pretty building, but the vendors are what make the market special. We have limited space for food that could be prepared on site, which is what a lot of customers want, is they want to come in and get a fresh piece of pizza that's hot, right? They want to come in and get something that's already prepared for them. And one of the challenges at the market is we don't have a lot of space to put a hood, or we don't have, hot water in the produce arcade for somebody to just start, a business that involves, a lot of hand washing out there, or, prepared food and hot water. We also have seen a lot of attrition from retirement and closures. So COVID was a major accelerator. I'm sure a lot of you have seen that in your own, various realms. So a lot of businesses that were kind of thinking about retiring the next, 5 or so years, all retired in the last 2 years. And so that's part of why we have such a high rate of vacancy. And then a fun aspect of the market is, we have 70 small businesses all operating under the same roof. And so finding consensus among 70 individual entrepreneurs is a challenge, because what's great for one business is not great for another, and how one person wants to operate might not be ideal for the market, and there's just all sorts of challenges with finding that consensus. Luckily, our vendors understand that we're operating as a market, not as individual businesses, but there's still always that tension there. Finances, major challenge. The last couple of years, the market's been operating at a loss. Luckily, City Council approved in their budget this year, we're anticipating needing to transfer over $800,000 from the general fund to the West Side Market's small enterprise fund. So the West Side Market was imagined to be sort of a self-sustaining business, same like the airport or the water department or the electrical department. The idea was that it would just self-sustain and that it wouldn't require taxpayer dollars. That's not been true in the last couple of years, and in part because our only source of revenue is tenant rent. So the only way for us to get more money right now is to raise rent on tenants, which would, of course, be a hardship to the tenants and would snowball kind of our challenges of the market. And in part because we have challenging finances, we're pretty understaffed at the market. I don't know that people really appreciate. There's essentially 3 people who work at the market office who are running that market. They're making sure bills get paid. They're making sure that cleaners show up on time. They're making sure service requests get filled. They're doing all the leasing and tenant recruitment. They're doing any marketing. I mean, it is essentially 3 people in the office that are running the market. Compared that to Findlay Market in Cincinnati, which is a third of the size of our market, they have 49 people on staff. So there's definitely a lot of room to grow in our staffing. And then another challenge to just talk through a little bit is data. So we collect data of how many people are coming in and out of the market. A fun market fact is that we get twice as many visitors per year as the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But we don't collect data on other important things like who are our customers? How much are they spending? How much are very small businesses making every year? What is the economic impact of the market? We know that, well over 100 people work at the market, but sort of what is that impact on the region's economy overall? We haven't really studied. So I often get questions about that I currently can't answer, but maybe will in the future. Some of our progress, I think we talked about in the intro, so I won't spend too much time on them. But some of the things that we've been looking at and have done already in the first 4 months is working with City Council to sort of renegotiate the leasing for tenants. So that means allowing tenants to sign leases for up to 3 years at a time. Before, our only option was 1 year. No more, no less, 1 year. So that gives some tenants a little bit more assurance if they want to invest some money in their space that they're going to be there for maybe up to 6 years at a time. It also allows us to do some of those short-term leasing. We're also making sure that vendors who do prepared foods, which we know is what kind of the demand in the neighborhood, before they were being charged 80% more per square foot to prepare, pad thai and sell it as a, butcher or a cheese vendor or a vegetable vendor. So we've stabilized that. So everyone's, being charged the same. So there's no more there's no disincentive anymore to do prepared food. We're also just trying to experiment and modernize. We're trying to say yes, which is a big change for the market, I think for the city of Cleveland overall. So one of our partners, Food Access Raises Everyone and Produce Perks Midwest, approached us about starting a program, a pilot, where we could offer $10,000 worth of free fruits and vegetables to eligible families, meaning that they're income qualified and have a child or a pregnant person in their household. So we're able to offer each household $240 worth of fruits and vegetables. We have $20,000 available for that program. That's going to start on May 14th. And I think we're going to sell out of coupons immediately. I mean, our partner at Produce Parks told me that last week and they got 100 phone calls. And we only have 84 coupon booklets to give away. We've had a lot of seniors reach out too who are interested in this type of program. And unfortunately, we just don't have a source of funds to accommodate that yet, but we're trying to increase access to food. We're trying to do pilots. We're gathering information. It might not be perfect or as large as what we want it to be, but we're trying things, right? We're doing something at the market and using it as a real community asset. We've repealed the ordinance that prohibits sale of alcohol at the market. People get really excited about this, and I always say to hold their horses a bit. Findlay Market in Cincinnati, which is a pretty good comparison for us, their nonprofit is the one who holds their liquor license. And so they use that as a source of revenue for, to subsidize their operations. They use those liquor sales. They also sell sponsorships for their bar. So they have our bar sponsor is Great Lakes Brewing. And then they also, because they have that one liquor license, it's a lot easier for them with events. It's just one operator to think through the liquor. So I can see a lot of perks to having an operator be the liquor license holder, but that means it's going to take a little bit more time before you can have a beer and walk around at the market. You can have a beer though at the Westside Market Cafe. There is a place to get, you know, beer, wine, cocktails at the market. You just can't walk around with it yet. And then another fun thing we're doing is the Price is Right's going to be there on Friday. So from 11 to 4, the Price is Right is doing this little this tour pop-up for their 50th anniversary. They reached out and said, hey, we want to do it at the Westside Market. Can we? And we said, we'll figure it out. So they're going to be kind of set up outside in the intersection of like Lorraine and 25th. So 11 o'clock, if you want to line up and play Plinko, I think the Price is Right will be there. And then of course we're continuing on with some building improvements. So trying to be strategic, trying to serve the vendors by thinking through how do we improve the elevators. That's a huge deal for the vendors. You might have noticed a ton of scaffolding around the market if you've gone by recently. That's part of a major clock tower and building envelope improvement project that's happening. That's the photo right here. Is all of the sort of issues with the clock tower right now. And we have a lot of water coming in through the masonry joints. So trying to fix all of that. So vision for the future, kind of one of the big things that we're thinking through is who should operate the market. The best practice countrywide and really nationally is not for a city to be the ones operating the market. Again, I can spend probably 3 hours talking about why that might be the case. So we're working towards making a decision on who we should plan to have operate the market in the future, whether that's starting a nonprofit from scratch or something else. And so just really thinking through, what can we do to make sure that the market is operated in a way that's sustainable. Like I mentioned, we're saying yes and trying things. So that's, one thing that's new for the market is just experimenting and seeing how we can do things differently. We continue to make strategic investments into the facility, but I think a pretty major change is now we're trying to think through as the asset holder or sort of the master lease holder as opposed to an operator. So what are the things that we need to do no matter who's operating this, and trying to leave room for any operational choices in the future. And then of course and forever engaging vendors, engaging shoppers, engaging stakeholders, right? The Westside Market is such an important community asset, and that means that we have to engage the community to know, how should that asset be leveraged, what's going to serve the vendors, what's going to serve the future of the Westside Market. So just continuing to listen and learn and talk to other market operators, find out what's working, what isn't working in other places, and take as many notes from everybody who has ideas for the market. So that's sort of where we're at the moment. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
Jessica, thank you so much for sharing all the work that you and the city have already started to do so very quickly. We've had a few questions come in. So you've mentioned looking to other markets around the country. So who are some of those markets that you look to? What are they doing well? How are they bringing in revenue? What are you taking away from some of the research you've done?
Out to pretty much every public market that I think is even a sort of close comp to us. And public market people are such good people. I have yet to have somebody, blow me off or say, no, I don't want to meet. On Friday, I actually, the Milwaukee public market is really interesting. It is operated by, I don't know how many people are familiar with special improvement districts. So entities that collect property tax from other nearby property owners. It seems that Milwaukee has a really strong special improvement sort of nonprofit world as opposed to CDCs or SIDS like we have in Cleveland. So their special improvement district operates their public market, and their market director came to Cleveland for a wedding at 78th Street Studios and was in town. So I took him on a tour of our market, and his wife was there and she was like, it is so funny to hear you guys talk about the market because he doesn't have a colleague in Milwaukee who has, the exact same sort of issues, but there's so many similarities. I don't know that I've seen a market where I've thought like we should copy paste, right? Like that's our market, let's copy paste that here. Our market's really unique in that we do have a ton of kind of the traditional the traditional public market vendors like butchers, fishmongers, cheese vendors, produce vendors. Pike's Place in Seattle, I was talking to their market manager. He said that they're down to 1 butcher, 2 fishmongers, and 1 produce vendor. And everything else is prepared foods. And he's saying like he's kind of struggling to find somebody to be a butcher in Seattle, right? And so to him, when I said, we have 8 butchers, he was like, that sounds like a dream. I'm like, send one of them to Seattle. we need one over here. I think the kind of operational models of Cincinnati and Columbus, because they are in Ohio and have similar, laws and traditions to us, are helpful. It is kind of surprising though, most markets aren't cash flowing. So most of them continue to rely on their cities for subsidy. And then I know you kind of mentioned sources of revenue. A lot of markets rely on alcohol sales is one, parking is another big source of revenue. Our parking lot is actually losing. The last 2 years it lost money. So it's not a source of revenue for us right now. Sponsorships, development, donations, all of that. Events is another big source of income for a lot of markets. And then Columbus actually just sold off their parking lot in front of them and are getting development fees for that parking lot. That's almost like a scary thing to say in a room like this, because I don't know that we're there for the city of Cleveland, but there's certainly things that other markets are doing that I try to learn from.
So looking at the vacancy rate and potential gaps in services, what kind of vendors are you looking to attract to fill those? And how many might be able to bring in local produce or local goods into the market?
Yeah, I think one thing that's a bit tricky is that we really don't have the capacity in-house for people to prepare food on site and then sell it on site. We're not compliant enough food code wise to do that, because it's such an outdated facility and we have so many more improvements that we need to do. So our ideal tenants are tenants that either already have a product or something that they're making in another facility that they're willing to bring in. Farmers markets are an option. One thing that's a little tricky is we do have these sort of consistent produce vendors, and we don't want to outcompete them out of their space because they're there year round. And so if we bring something in that's just seasonal, then how do we still protect sort of our year round produce vendors? There's a lot to balance there. And the produce business is hard. It's really tough. Again, like thinking about Lancaster Public Market in central Pennsylvania, they have more independently owned farms like in the, I think, 1,000 miles around them than anywhere else in the country. And they're at half the number of produce vendors than they were in 2019. So, I think every market is struggling with how to get, local, produced goods at their market. But yeah, I think there's lots of other, markets to look at to see what people do. Bakeries are always great. People can prepare salads and bring them on site. There's all sorts of ways to kind of start a business with the West Side market.
So with so much of the trend being convenience and quick access, have you considered an online central ordering point and possibly curbside pickup?
Offer curbside pickup. One thing that's, just a major challenge at the market is, like I said, it's 70 small businesses. And so finding consensus among those 70, some of them still don't accept credit cards. So to get them to all opt into an online ordering system is certainly a challenge, especially when you consider our really low staff capacity right now. And so there are some vendors who offer curbside pickup, but it's vendor by vendor. An online ordering platform we've looked at, they're really expensive. So, yeah, they're really expensive and they would take a ton of coordination from staff that we've got to get the day-to-day right at the market before we start to expand to do, add-on services.
So as you think through about engaging customers and kind of building confidence with the West Side market, there's been varying experiences with customers and vendors. And question around, is there kind of a code of ethics or standards for vendor behavior that might really help restore some confidence in shoppers?
There is something that I take incredibly seriously because I live in Ohio City. I know the market, and I know so many people who say, I don't shop at the market because I don't trust the products, or I don't trust the quality, or I don't like being hawked at. There are rules for the market that prohibit hawking, that require various quality measures. The challenge is enforcement. And one of the questions in here I see in the chat is, talking about how can people be helpful. At some point, I'm sure I will come, and the mayor will come with our hands out asking for help. And I would love to have like a quality enforcement position at the market, like a person who's there doing quality enforcement, because we have good rules. It's just a matter of staying on top of vendors to make sure that those rules are followed.
So as you think ahead to the ideas and the projects and what might be coming, what excites you most about the innovations that are coming to the market?
Among the things that excite me most are just people's like feeling the energy in the market is really nice. Even in the past 4 months, I think people who are consistent market shoppers have noticed that vendors are in a better mood, customers are in a better mood, people are feeling just generally hopeful. And so I love that. I am, really hoping that we can figure out a way to add some public seating. I want who doesn't want to sit at the market? Everyone, right? Like we all want to grab food and sit, not on the balcony. The balcony is wonderful, right? But it's not the most comfortable place to sit. So I'm hoping that we can figure out some solutions for public seating. And, my hope is that at some point the market really starts to feel like a third place in our community, not just a grocery store, not just, a place to bop around in while you're waiting for brunch, reservations to open up at, whatever restaurant is close to you, but a place that people want to meet and gather and hang out, and in the process, buy food and goods and sustain their families with. So I don't know that there's one thing that I'm really looking forward to. I think it's just these, day-to-day steps of seeing things improve with the market. I get excited about nice signage when I'm like, oh, our construction barrier has nice signage. That's a good change. Like I saw somebody somewhere say like, oh, what professional signage at the market. That's good. I like that.
So as you've heard the needs of the vendors that are there, what do they need, the small businesses, the vendors, to be successful? And how can our corporate citizens, our community members, help them reach that success?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that I definitely spend a lot of time thinking of. If you ask the vendors, they would say marketing. I don't know that marketing is it. I think that's part of it, but I don't think that's the beginning and the end. We really have not had a strong tradition of like small business development at the West Side market. I come from the CDC background, so I feel pretty plugged into, small business development centers in various ways to offer assistance to businesses. Most vendors are incredibly self-reliant, and I think it will, they will continue to default to self-reliance. I think what people need, what vendors need, is one, for people to kind of who shop at them to use word of mouth to say, oh, I shop here and it's the best place in Cleveland to get chicken, or this is the best place to get, cheese, or wherever it might be. Bringing people not just to visit and look at the space, but to really shop. And that takes time, right? The market's not an easy place to shop. It's a place that you sort of have to get to know and love and want to shop at. And at the end of the day, that's what vendors need. They need customers. They need people who are gonna, take the time to shop there and make it a priority to shop there. I know somebody in the chat asked about hours, and that's a whole other thing to think about. But if you can accommodate the hours, I would say, shop at the market.
Well, Jessica, we thank you so much for sharing the vision and what's coming for such a gem in our community, and we look forward to seeing the continued progress.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for the support, everyone.
Thanks for joining us, Jessica, and please keep up your great work. You have a whole group of people here just standing at the ready to support you. So please know that we're grateful for all that you are doing.